Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Abarca with Andy Lipson. Where are you at right now, Andy? You're in San Francisco.
I'm in San Francisco.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. I'm in Mexico City right now. And I am very glad we are still being able to continue recording even when we're far apart.
Even though it's the holidays.
Yes. And I think we have better reception. So it's last time people are being forgiving. So I'm happy that because this internet is better.
Did you have a good holiday?
Right. I did. I was sick on the holiday, but I got over it with a little bit of tequila.
Yeah. I got a Nintendo Switch.
Oh,
from my brother.
For Christmas.
Yeah, and Brandy got me a laser game that's going to be good for my science classes.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I'm waiting on my gifts for the 6th of January.
Oh,
from Dia de los Reyes. Yeah. So it's different.
I see.
Although some families, like I said last time, some people celebrating Christmas.
Yes.
Right, Andy. Can you get us started then? We're going to discuss two topics today on Syria and the government pulling out. Trump had decided to pull out. And we're going to discuss the government shutdown as well as the related topic of border security.
Right. I think we'll be able to hit two issues without going too long. So that's the hope, at least. All right. So we had talked about doing questions, and I'm still collecting questions from people. And really, I was in New York, walking on the street. I think Brandy was doing shopping, and I was just walking around. And as I'm walking, I was listening.
Brandy is your partner.
Correct. And I'm walking by, and I hear this couple talking as I walk by, and one of them was like, said something like, well, it looks like we're just handing over Syria to Assad, and I just got very irritated with that, as people know, I think it was around December 19th, Trump announced a full withdrawal of troops from Syria. In addition, subsequently, he also talked about a half troop pull down in Afghanistan of about 7,000 troops. But I think the one in Syria is the one I want to talk about more. And I just think it's outrageous that there are people out there. And New York, like San Francisco, is a liberal city. It's a blue state. It's a blue city, and part of a blue state. And it's disgusting to me that liberals are having such a freak out over Trump calling the Syria withdrawal. I'm going to talk about what I think the Syria withdrawal is about. It's not a peace movement. I get it, and that's not the issue. But the liberal response is outrageous, saying that the beneficiary of such a pullout is Russia, is Iran, that this is a Christmas gift to Putin, that we can't pull out. We can't pull out too quickly because we have to defend the Kurds, in eastern Syria, I think, and all this stuff, all this pretext for liberals saying why we have to continue an imperialist adventure in that region. Now, mind you, Donald Trump is not anti-imperialist. He's an imperialist, and I'm going to talk about why that is. But it's just outrageous to me that all these people who were freaking out about Donald Trump being a president, being this warmonger, being this crazy guy, now he's actually doing something that the anti-war movement ostensibly should want its president to do. This is what people were expecting Obama to do. That is, pull out troops from Afghanistan, pull out troops from Syria. Obama actually was stopped by Congress from actually invading Syria, but then ended up doing it anyway in 2015. And so what Trump is doing is pulling those troops out.
And was given the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, exactly. Now whether Trump will do that or not, because he said this before, he's going to do this and didn't do it. But in both cases, there were gas attacks that were pinned on Assad that became the pretext for Trump having to stay in.
Yeah, the chemical attacks weapons, right?
Right. And those were ostensibly said they were from Assad. I think there's questions. Well, in fact, UN investigations that have done, at least on the first one, was definitely not from Assad. The second one, there was no indication it came from Assad. And the primary beneficiaries of those gas attacks would be what are being called the rebels, but they're basically just U.S. proxies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that was most annoying to me, is that Donald Trump, the person who everyone was so scared about with the nuclear button, is actually pulling troops out, and liberals are actually to the right of him on this question. Now, there's more to say about this, but that was the first thing that was just like, my feeling is if you are upset with Donald Trump for pulling those troops out, then sign up to the U.S. military, sign up for the Marines, and get your ass over to Syria and fight. That's what I say. Unless you're doing that, then shut the F up. Because otherwise you are just a hawk, you are just a warmonger, you're no better than Wolfowitz, you're no better than Dick Cheney, you're just a liberal hawk if you are having problems right now with Donald Trump pulling those troops out. What will be the alternative for the United States is a different story, but it was just nauseating to me to have to listen to this nonsense. And I just got so mad last week when I heard this guy just off the top of his cuff saying, well, we're handing it over to Assad. Yeah, Assad is the president of Syria. It's not our country. We don't get to decide what we do with it. And the notion that workers in this country think that they benefit from deciding what happens in Syria is part of the whole backwards notion people have. And U.S. imperialism does not help U.S. workers. It certainly doesn't help Syrian workers. And it's just part of that backwards left that we have right now. That people are actually, saying that the primary beneficiary of this is Russia or Iran. Pulling U.S. troops out of any region it should be the goal of any anti-war movement of all these countries. We've got over 1,000 bases around the world. We should be pulling troops out of everywhere. So,
I have a question for you, Andy.
Yeah.
How would you respond then to people? Because, this is the media will constantly be portraying that the ISIS terrorism will just expand because there is no monitoring of it in that part of the region. How would you respond to that? Because no one wants terrorism, obviously, from ISIS or stuff, but it's not. But pulling out is what people think that you would have it just expand itself in that region.
Well, first off, terrorism. The notion of terrorism is violence used to force political changes in some country. So why does the U.S. have 1,000 bases across the globe? I call all of those bases terrorism. I call all of the U.S. military across the globe and its actions, drone strikes everywhere, is terrorism. So if you want to stop terrorism, the center of terrorism in this globe is the United States. It is not ISIS. They're small fries. The U.S. actually has funded ISIS in the past. In fact, the U.S. goes between talking about whether they're trying to fight ISIS or whether they're fighting Assad. The reason that the U.S. is in Syria, probably the biggest reason that the U.S. is in Syria, is for doing regime change, not to fight terrorists. They're arming what would otherwise be called terrorists by the Assad regime. And the fact is that the U.S. is the terrorists. So the best way to fight terrorism is to defeat the U.S. empire. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say. I mean, the terrorists the terrorists we should be worried about are the ones that come right out of our country, that invade all the other countries, that send drones everywhere, that send naval ships everywhere and fly sorties over countries and drop bombs on countries and just kill people with no real regard to their rights, to their sovereignty. Our country is doing that across the globe, and we have to be stopped. And it's not just a moral thing to be stopped. It's part of actually saving this globe from destruction through world war. So I reject the notion that ISIS is the problem, partly because U.S. funds them, but the biggest reason is because the U.S. outstrips ISIS in violence 10,000 to 1.
Should there be transition to move out?
And
slowly then also move out of Afghanistan and everywhere else.
The people who have talked about the transition have talked about it this way, which is they've said, well, the U.S. needs to protect the Kurds who will be attacked by Turkey now.
On the northern side, the northern part of the border. And actually, Turkey was actually going to, before Trump had announced, attack the northern part.
Yeah.
And they are the United Forces alliances with the Pentagon. And the Pentagon said that they would be unacceptable, correct?
No, the U.S. is probably going to support now, or at least allow Turkey to attack the Kurds. Although I do also think that Saudi Arabia is going to get involved in arming forces that we would otherwise call ISIS in that region to basically make sure that Syria is still destabilized. So this is why this is not a peace act. This is just shifting
transitions
around.
You're saying are not peace acts.
No, of course. That's the thing is like the reason I don't call for a slow transition is the U.S. was never there for peace. The U.S. is there for control, political control, for terror to enact their will and their interests, to make sure that Russia doesn't get to put a pipeline through Syria, to make sure that Iran is not able to get a foothold into the rest of the region, and to just basically make sure the U.S. controls the oil in that region. So that's the reason they're there. They're not there for the Kurds. They're not there for ISIS. They're not there for peace. So they're there for naked imperial aims. And if people ask, well, how should they get out? They should get out by plane, by boat, and as quickly as possible.
Yes, I agree.
The longer they are there, and having UN troops there, it's just another face of Western imperialism. I don't accept that either. So, but the fact is anybody who thinks that the U.S. staying there helps support somebody. This also gives lie to the fact that the U.S. has used the Kurds as a standing army in the region. But as soon as the Kurds, who have a right to self-determination in that region, as soon as they handed over that struggle to the United States, this put them in this bind. The U.S. You are no longer in a right for self-determination when you hand it over to an imperial power to basically say, we're willing to be your shock troops on the ground. And that's what the Kurds did, and they handed over their cause to the U.S. empire. And so the U.S. empire sold it on a dime. Look. It was really right after Trump had his conversation with Erdogan. How do you pronounce that guy's name?
Erdogan, Tayyip Erdogan.
Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey. He got off the phone with him, and pretty much it was a done deal. Now, my own feeling is that this is actually a direct result of the stuff that went down with bin Salman, only, with Turkey and bin Salman and Khashoggi. I really think all of this is basically Turkey being able to reap the benefits of the strong hand that came out of that whole. Bin Salman is still in power. Turkey did not release enough information.
From Saudi Arabia.
Yes. Did not release enough information to get him out, and seems to agree. So here's what's happening. Saudi Arabia is going to basically be giving money to Turkey to rebuild in areas. In fact, they're talking about giving money to Turkey in this area of the Kurdish region where the Turks are going to now attack. And the U.S. is spending $3.5 billion to give them Patriot missiles to Turkey. Okay? So U.S. is pulling out. They're basically giving the green light to Turkey to go attack the Kurds. And they're going to help, and they're going to have and Saudi Arabia is going to bankroll it. So, this is just big power politics. And now, who's also attacking in Syria? Israel. So
yeah, that's right. It was a Lebanese airspace. What was it? And through the air, it was a
Yeah,
missile, no?
that's right. And so this is part of the U.S. going it alone, using the allies that they are tightest with. That means Saudi Arabia and Israel are the big forces. Turkey's involved in this because Turkey had this. I feel like they had this won over on bin Salman. So now Turkey has gotten a good deal that the United States is willing to do, and that's what happens when you sell your right to your fight for self-determination to an empire like the United States. They will sell you down the river, on a whistle, and who else was crying about this? Germany was crying about this. France was crying about this. Britain was crying about this. Oh my God! Look what the United States has done, leaving Syria. Well, that's because the U.S. is going it alone, And now it's what's going to happen for Europe is they're going to have to build their own military, because the U.S. is no longer willing to say we'll be your protector, because
That's right.
right.
No,
So
I mean, I'm agreeing that I forgot to mention that they are building their own military. Europe now, the countries, as a continent together.
right,
Yeah.
right. So this is not a peace move by Trump. This is a continued move of him shifting the military focus away from Russia and towards China, trying to separate China from Russia militarily and politically, and basically temporarily allying with Russia, or at least saying we're not going to make war with you, but preparing for war with China, and basically leaving Europe to deal with, or basically saying we're no longer going to use Europe as a bulwark against Russia. We don't need to use you in that regard. We don't need you anymore. And it's go it alone. It's the nations breaking up into their own interests, and these are the preconditions for World War III. So I support this move, but people should have no illusions about it. It is not a peace move. It's merely changing the actors of who will be making war in the name of the U.S. empire.
Just for our listeners, I wanted to just clarify: is the late of the 25th of December is when Israel launched an attack from across the Lebanese airspace in response to an anti-aircraft missile launch from Syria, according to the IDF.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, I just want to ask you something. I don't know if I want to say this on full recording, but I have a question because, when it comes to foreign affairs, it's not my strongest suit, right? But I have a question that I said, even before this tonight, I agree that they should be pulled out. And I remember we had this conversation sometime, I think the very first time we were doing this
podcast.
Video. Yeah. And one of my concerns was the chemical attack weapons onto the Syrian people from their government. I don't support interventions. And yet I'm left with this question. And my question around it is, when, the Arab Spring, right, that happened in the Middle East, when they happen and then they are repressed by their governments, I'm not saying that military intervention from another country is supposed to happen, but how are we supposed to help our fellow comrades, the fellow workers out from different countries, right? I suppose you had responded to this. I remember you had said, well, we focus here. Every worker focuses on their own country. And we focus here so that we don't allow them to intervene to disrupt whatever is going on and let the Syrian people deal with it. To me, it sounds, well, it's not just to me. I'm sure lots of people are asking, that sounds as if you're abandoning people that could potentially be massacred, like in Cambodia, like in Yemen, like in East Timor, where there are large genocide by the very strong, powerful forces, where unless you have, in East Timor, it could have gone continued had it not been documented and reported and seen and televised, right? And you put pressure on governments like that. I don't know if you know what I'm trying to ask. Something, if you understand.
I think what you're saying is is there some way of using the U.S. military, and the East Timor, it would have been the Australian military, which was also complicit in some of the atrocities that took place there.
Yeah.
You're saying that we can use the U.S. military to bring to protect people in those countries
Who are fighting for democracy.
right, and that's not. But I'm saying that the reason the U.S. is anywhere in the world has nothing to do with democracy. There's not democracy in our country, Eduardo.
I understand.
But no,
I understand.
you got to. If you understand, there's no democracy in our country. That it's basically run by the wealthy, and basically we have a corrupt system which is rigged through and through in our country. Then it is impossible for the United States to then transport democracy or liberty anywhere, and through the U.S. military. And it's not just that it's incapable of doing it; it has no interest in doing that. That's why it's supporting Saudi Arabia in its aggression in Yemen, and it's about to support Saudi Arabia in its aggression in Syria. That's why it's about to support Turkey in attacking its allies among the Kurds. Because the U.S. has no interest in democracy or peace or anything. It has interest in one thing. Well, two things. Capital, money, and power. And those are connected. And whatever gives them access to those things, that they can use that as an advantage over the other imperial powers, Russia, China, Germany, France, Britain, the G8. The G8 is a group of hostile enemies. They all hate each other. But they all have to act like they're playing nice, because at the end of the day, it's a show, you know. But their goal is to screw each other over at the expense of their working classes in their respective countries. And
I suppose, would you be somewhat in agreement with what happened in Cuba when they finally took over? Fidel Castro took over and kicked out the Batista government, and they had so-called socialism. They were beginning there, and then, you know, Che Guevara wanted to have this way of intervention onto a capitalist system done in other parts of Latin America. As a matter of fact, it is recorded that he had said to Fidel Castro, "If I help you, I don't want to just remain in Cuba. I want this to happen throughout all of Latin America." And he went to Bolivia to support and to create a guerrilla, you know?
Yeah, guerrilla struggle.
Yeah. Would that sort of struggle be more of your...
Not with the United States, because the U.S., like I said, has 1,000 bases across the globe. If the best thing the U.S. workers can do for peace on this globe, the way to not abandon workers internationally, is to stop the U.S. government from positioning all its troops across the globe everywhere for economic aim, for political aim. Again, that's why they're there. And economic
gain.
Right. And economic gain means basically you don't get to,
yes.
Those countries don't get to use the resources the way they want to for their people. The U.S. uses them for their interests. That's what that means. That means we're stealing their stuff. So if we want to not abandon the people of the globe, then what we have to do is basically take down our military and bring our military home completely. That's the only way we cannot. When we abandon the rest of the world, when we allow our military to go across the globe and do all these things. That's what it means to abandon the rest of the world. To abandon the task of being part of that international working class, trying to build something just for each other. So there's only one way to bring justice to this world. That means taking down our own government, bringing our military home. And there's no other way. What I would support our government. I mean, and this is what happened in the Russian Revolution. Russia was an empire, and once the socialists, the Bolsheviks took power, they pretty much just put up their tent stakes in Georgia and all these different satellite countries where they had basically been an empire, and gave those countries, basically the right to rule themselves.
Mm.
Now they rolled that back later, and I think it even started to be rolled back under Lenin, which I think it was a mistake. But that's what you'd have to do. You would have to basically what I think the Unionists would have to do after a revolution would basically be like bring all the troops home, get out of every country, and we can support people's struggles, but we really have to stay out of those things first.
Otherwise, it'll spiral to something else.
But there's just too much. I think the U.S. has too much of a hand. There's too much chauvinism, nationalism, the right of the U.S. to decide, white man's burden, a combination of nationalism and racism that the working class has absorbed as a result of the imperial aims of the ruling class in this country. We have to do some detox. I feel like before we can go intervening in countries in any meaningful way. There was a case of the brigades in Spain in the in the Civil War in Spain, where workers.
Please expand on this, what you're going to say, because I think I'm not even familiar with this, right?
Okay.
I think it's important for our audiences.
There were workers who were communists at the time who actually joined guerrilla struggles in Spain, went there and were part of fighting the fascists, Franco and stuff like that, on the ground, literally on the ground with folks there. I could see things like that, but honestly, I think the biggest thing the United States has to do is pull up its tent stakes and get out of every country.
What about in Cuba, where Fidel Castro has sent his some guerrilla forces over to Africa? Do you remember that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I would have to say that I don't think of Cuba as an imperial power, so I have a different lens for them. And if the rebels in Africa invited the aid of the Cubans, then I'd be more open to it. But we have a 150-year history since the American Civil War, and obviously we talked about the colonization process and the eradication of Native Americans in this country itself. We have a 200 to 300-year history of a violent, racist, imperialistic, colonial mentality that we have to kind of get rid of. And I would be a little hesitant to have Americans, so-called, people from the United States, going over to other countries saying they're trying to liberate them, unless we have such a history of doing that in name, but what we're really doing is something else, that I would be really reluctant to engage in that. But like I said, the first steps the United States would have to take in the course of a revolution or after a revolution would be to pull up all its military out of everywhere and get out. And that would be the greatest, it would be the greatest contribution to world peace we can make.
Mm-hmm. Just to clarify again, so you are supporting guerrilla forces, inviting other guerrilla forces to help them support to overthrow a dictatorship or a capitalist system or something that is ruled by an undemocratically, and the people are really working hard to establish it.
You better watch. I would say any struggle for self-determination better watch out when they invite other people in, whether it be the United States or Russia or China. All those countries, when they get invited in, they pretty much take your struggle over. That's what happens. Russia is involved in a dirty war in Chechnya, just smashing rebels there. So they're no better. They don't have the record of us as being they have a $60 billion military. We have a $760 billion military. They have, 10 bases. We have 1,000 bases across the globe. But they're still an imperial power.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad I asked the question. It's not my. I'm not, when it comes to war and foreign affairs, it's not my. It's not like I'm very fluid in that language yet.
Yeah.
But I had some questions, and I thought, well, here's where I have some doubts how I would, because I do want every self. I want people to fight for themselves,
Yeah.
to
So
have
do I.
to be able to, like the Arab Springs,
Right.
to be able to come up against their government without any intervention
Right.
and have them deal. Like if we're to do that in this government,
But and one of the biggest interferers in people facing down their own government has been the United States. Like Saudi Arabia is a perfect example of a people who can't take down their own government or are going to have a tougher time taking down their government because of the support the U.S. gives to that criminal, gang at the top. Same is going to be true with Turkey. Turkey's now going to be the U.S.'s best friend for a little while. Now that there's been a rearrangement now, and it looks like Trump's plan again. All the fight is the Democrats are not fighting over peace. They're fighting over who to make war with. Trump is more interested in challenging China more immediately militarily. Clinton and all these liberal peace people are interested in pushing Russia and continuing with using Europe as the bulwark against Russia. And Trump is trying to go in a different direction. Which will be more successful? Both plans will lead to World War III if we don't have a socialist revolution. So neither will be successful in averting war.
Yeah. I'm not looking forward to World War III.
Yeah, me either.
God.
Duck and roll or something like that. Isn't that what you have to do when there's a nuclear bomb coming?
Oh, God. I think we have to do more than duck and roll.
I think so. Well, try to figure out how you want to position yourself so you can figure out what your shadow is going to look like against the wall, when the flash of the nuclear bomb, so make some sort of cool, like Banksy, graffiti thing. Maybe middle finger or something like that.
Yeah. Anyhow, maybe we can do an episode on art on Banksy next time because he is really radical.
Yes, I think he's a cool. I mean, he's done some neat stuff. I liked what he did with the with that one piece that got destroyed when it got sold by Southby.
Oh yeah,
that was cool.
I like his pieces when it's Stratford upon Avon. I went to England and they had a whole thing on refugees. It was called Dismal Land.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to try to focus here because I know myself I can get distracted. All right, Andy. The government shutdown.
Yes. Tell us about it.
Well, it happened the 22nd of December. It was, before that, I had seen, and I think it went viral with Nancy Pelosi in the White House as well as Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep.
And they were seated right there with Trump and Mike Pence, who, and then they had all these memes on Mike Pence, and he was the better of. Everybody was just staying quiet, just watching the whole show.
He was so uncomfortable.
Nancy Pelosi trying to be, trying to remain with politeness, trying not to have debate in front of the press. Right. And Chuck Schumer. It's not Chuck Schumer. It's not Chuck Schumer. Is it Chuck Schumer?
Yeah.
He's the majority, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure. And then Trump was debating them. The point being is Trump has shifted on his position, but he is trying to fulfill on a campaign promise. He said that my country would pay for it first. Mexico would pay for it.
Yeah.
Then he said that it wouldn't cost that much, and that you just have it paid first, and then with the tariffs, pay it over. And then eventually he shifted again and said something along the lines of, you will just have it solar panel wall, so it'll be cheaper. Mm-hmm. And then he's asking now for the U.S. American government to pay for it. And he really wants this wall, and he is asking for $5 billion.
Yeah.
I don't know what benefit there will come from it. But if he does not get it, he started this government shutdown, and it went into a partial shutdown, I should say, on the 22nd of December, and then and now we are in day 6 of this government shutdown. in January 2017, the Mexican president at that time, Enrique Peña Nieto, said that we would not pay for this wall, and now there is going to be debate about how to negotiate for it to happen, because he really wants to have it. I wanted just to mention a couple of figures, because this is the border wall is something that has been invested in even before this government shutdown in the recent discussions. In March, Congress appropriated $1.6 billion already out of $1.3 trillion spending bill, which already helped toward adding and repairing fence along the border. And there has been a lot of money already invested into this. So some estimates have shown that $8 to $12 billion cost for such the project, even though Trump is asking for $5 billion. Now he is thinking of trying to lower it.
Right.
But it could cost between $15 to $25 billion. And I, like Chuck Schumer, there can be, this is what he said, that there can be national security, but without a wall. We had already discussed on a previous video that on immigration and open borders, and we have stated our position. What I'm concerned about is that all the workers that will be affected in this time, especially as this will carry on into the new year, and it's just a tantrum, and it's just a way to the optics of it, and to show Trump that he is trying to fulfill on a campaign promise and blame it on to the other party. Quite honestly, whether they come to negotiation or not for the funding, there should be no funding for it.
Correct.
And that is, it's not necessary. And you can use this funding for other things that we could use for.
Yep.
But that is where it stands now. I don't know if you want to say anything about that before I carry on.
Well, I agree with you that it is completely unnecessary. I do think that Trump is doing this for the 2020 elections. I think there's a piece of why he's doing that stuff in Syria and Afghanistan to say that he came through on some promises as well. Although I do think what he's doing in Syria and Afghanistan is also related to a change in a shift in policy of the U.S. empire in terms of how it projects power. But
Mattis quit for it as well, right?
The Mad Dog Mattis quit. And everyone, again, the Washington Post, New York Times was like, oh my gosh, where did Mad Dog go? We want Mad Dog Mattis, the dude who massacred people in Fallujah. We want him to be back here. Whatever. I should get off that. But this also is Trump attempting to, well, there's a few things here. I think he's attempting to, go on a promise. This is about the 2020 elections. This is his going to be what he's going to campaign over. Is his ability to build a wall that the other compromise he's been making recently is to no longer call it a wall, but call it a fence. Apparently, the Democrats are more okay with him calling it a fence than with a wall, and that would be a concession. And like you said, the Democrats have already conceded on the wall in a sense. It's just about how much of they're willing to build, because both parties are dedicated to keeping immigrants out or controlling the flow of labor and into this country, both in and out. And so I think there's two things that come to mind for me. Is one is how much it benefits the U.S. ruling class, for both the Democrats and Republicans, to be having this whole show. I mean, there's nothing here. Not that there isn't anything here. Unfortunately, it's coming down on the heads of immigrants. But there's nothing of vital for U.S. workers coming up here. This is not about Medicare. This is not about peace. This is not about it's not going to protect the environment. There is a degree to which the ability to scapegoat workers coming in is going to allow the U.S. to build a stronger apparatus to control workers at home. So there is that. But there's nothing good here for workers. So I think there's two things that are being built. One is there's just just outright scapegoating going on, to make it seem like the biggest problem we have are people coming across our border along the southern border. But there is also an attempt to make it so that the U.S. government convinces U.S. workers that building a security apparatus that protects us is a vital thing, and that's going to become very important when we have the next recession. Which, Wall Street had a really bad December. It just had a big good day today, but everyone knows right around the corner in the next year to 2 years, there's going to be another correction in the economy. $13.5 trillion worth of household debt is held by the U.S. By U.S. workers. And also there's a massive amount of student debt that's held. I don't think any of the fundamentals of the economy are in a situation where are such that they've overcome the business cycle and overcome even the last 2008 recession. I mentioned the Chris Hedges article that said trillions and trillions of dollars are floating in the global economy. That was just printed money in order to support it. So there is going to be another recession, and that will require more profit and more surplus value being extracted from workers, and that will require repression to do it. So the security apparatus being built and being defended by both parties right now is going to be part of what both parties are preparing the working class in this country for, is a situation where we will protect you with our state, but it's not protecting, it's protecting profits, and it's going to be actually pushing workers to the margins with that state. But they're getting us to buy into it using this game of shutting down the government and making it seem like this is the most vital thing for the future of our country. And at the same time, there's about 800,000 workers who are struggling now because they're either not getting paid, they might get paid later. Some of them are being furloughed. Some of them are having to work without pay. The interesting thing is that the parts of the government that are functioning are the security parts of government. The parts of the government that are allowed to kind of go are the things that people actually use as services. So again, it gives lie to the notion that this government is for us.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something like Homeland Security, and not to mention, and I should add, excuse me, I should add that with the recent the deaths of children that have died recently under the custody of the Border Patrol, which is just sickening that is happening. They're older children as well. I mean, imagine how much the fragile toddlers or smaller children. I think the boy was 8 years old and had died, Guatemalan boy. So I just wanted to insert that in. Well, not only is it also not effective and not important and not necessary, it's also intervening with the controversy of indigenous people's lands and moving into their spaces where they have no borders in those areas. For them, it's a space where they have their land, their tribal lands, and that's one. The other one is I was reading about landowners owning spaces, and I can post some documentary YouTube videos on this one where there are people who live and they have to cross over a border because their land is in the middle of the border, and then other landowners as well will have their lands being taken over if they build it as well, which is unnecessary. And Trump wants to build this aesthetically beautiful, like Great Wall of China, he had said once.
Right.
And not to mention habitat, environmental impact, the monarch butterfly that travels from northern to southern part of Mexico to the north and then back. It will interfere, and there's already bulldozing that is happening, and it's going to continue happening in 2009, destroying lots of beautiful habitat. That
2019, you mean, right?
That will happen in 2019. Thank you. And yes. I don't want 2019 to happen. I want us to go in a time machine back. So, it's just conservationists are trying to fight from happening. And border walls will not keep people out. They just will not keep people out.
Right.
Whether it is in Spain, whether it is here, and whether it's on the French Calais, people trying to cross over on the channel through the boats, and there's just it's not going to keep people out. But people are moving up around because they're trying to work.
But it will make people who are coming in more desperate. Because they will build the borders, they will build the walls in places where the natural terrain isn't as like part of the reason that people were dying. Like when Clinton built their walls, they built some borders.
Yeah.
The number of people who died in the desert increased dramatically when the Clintons built their walls. The same thing's going to happen when Trump builds his. There's going to be more deaths, and it is going to mean that the workers who come into this country are going to be that much more desperate, and will do that much more they'll be that much more pliable by the capitalists who need to use them, whether it's for farming, for janitorial services, for scabbing, for getting these workers to go against striking workers. So that's what this is about. It is not. They know for a fact. They are counting on immigration, people coming in here illegal. They are counting on it because they will use the desperation of those workers against workers here.
Why do workers migrate? We should repeat. Why do workers migrate? They migrate because we live in a system where you need to have better wages or better pay. And if your economy, like here in Mexico, lots of U.S. Americans come. I'm going to these places, and lots of people come here because they can afford for the peso. So they come here, or people go up there to have their more value to their dollar.
Right.
Because they'll be making money in dollars.
Right.
That is the reason why people migrate, for work, for labor. Those are the opportunities, according to the system, that we have, that the American dream of having all those materialistic things.
Right.
And unless we don't have that, then we won't have we'll just continue having migrations. Migrations are just, I think that the way that I see migrations will continuously happen forever, as long as we continue, because they just are a way of mobilizing people. And I also think that people need to understand that people, and I've said this in another video as well, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but people don't migrate because they want to leave their families behind, leave their hometowns behind, leave the community they love or they grew up in or their homeland. People migrate because they have to, or they're escaping things. And I've said it as well, that the very same thing that people are putting into the fears of what migrants are in the country of the USA are the very same thing that migrants are afraid of.
Yeah.
They are afraid of those very same things, and they're running away from those things.
Yeah.
And I'd be willing to, again, put some more, I will put some documentaries there where on the YouTube, like I had in the past, where there's just stories of people, even grandmothers, taking their grandchildren across Mexico, all the Central American grandmothers taking their grandchildren to the borders and leaving them there in Tijuana on the border towns, and then going back because they have to take care of their other grandchildren. It's really, really sad. But migration, this is what this does, the pressures of the economy, the pressures of society, the pressures of not having opportunities or violence or gangs, because these are all hubs of oppression and hubs of intervention. Well, not hubs of intervention. When you intervene and you have your foreign policy, like the USA intervening in Central America and having left that country in chaos.
Right.
And then there's all this that's happening, but we forget history, don't we?
Yeah. Well, and to forget history is one thing you're not hearing about from the Democrats is abolish ICE anymore. What they are now doing is the Democrats are now essentially reaching agreement with Trump that we are going to hold about 800,000 government workers' jobs hostage to decide what the nature of border security will be.
Well, Nancy will be voted in next week, so yeah. I don't think she's pro-abolish ICE.
Yeah, I mean, we have two parties who are willing to use the government workers as chess pieces in a war against workers abroad that will ultimately be used to create a security apparatus that will be used to control us here at home. So they're united in this, and the irony is what we're seeing here is the capitalist use the weapon of the strike. This is the capitalist using a strike weapon to fight against each other and to fight against us. And I think, again, we should learn a lesson here. We should learn a lesson from the Yellow Vests in France. We should learn a lesson from Trump and the Democrats and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, which is when they tell us that strikes are illegal, we can't strike. We should say, well, you do it all the time. You fight. You shut down places all the time. We're not going to let you do it. We're going to shut the workplace down when we want to. And that's what a strike is. A strike is an expression of who controls the workplace, who controls the economy. And so workers have to lose this notion that a strike is some sort of like a thing from a bygone era, or it's some sort of a reckless, chaotic act. It is an act of getting control of your future and of your present. And that's what the government is doing, is what is showing those government workers right now. It's saying, we control you. We will decide which ones of you work. We will decide which ones of you get paid. And we should learn a lesson of saying, so apparently shutting down workplaces is a tool we can use. And we should use it for our aims and not let them use it for theirs.
Yeah. Just to say something about that, though, we should mention that there is the budget management, something like that. There is an office where they do have personnel not lose their positions or to get funding because it's either a matter of security or life or something like that. I was reading.
Yeah.
And they will be keeping their jobs. But there are the 1,000 other workers that are losing their pay, and they have to go through this even through the holidays.
Right.
So that's that.
Yeah.
All right, Andy. Anything else that you want to add?
No. Happy holidays.
Yeah. I don't notice anything. You can cut this off, but I don't see your lip. I don't see it being a distraction.
No. It's. I think it's fine. I just feel it in here.
Yeah.
So if we do keep this, I hurt my lip in jiu-jitsu, so it was bleeding earlier. So now I think it's fine.
We should mention that Andy is preparing for the revolution.
That's right. If choking out our opponents helps, then I think we're in good shape.
Andy, don't put that there. Be followed and spied on. Violent person. You must be part of the black. What do you call it? Black brick. People.
Yeah, the black bloc.
Black bloc.
Yeah. Antifa.
Yeah. No. Well. So let's discuss. What will we be discussing for the following week?
I've already, and now I'm starting to collect questions. Brandy gave me a question that she has for me that I think is a good one. So I'm starting to collect questions from people that we can do. So hopefully next week we'll do our questions.
I have 6 questions.
Ooh, damn! All right.
Yeah.
So I think we can do it next week then.
All right, because I have 6 questions.
Do you want
mostly around socialism for you?
Oh shit. Yeah. Do you want me to share the ones I'm getting with you beforehand?
Yeah, I'll share them with you as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. I will write it out. I'll do it tonight, start it off, and then I will write it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so I've basically asking people to have, if they have questions for me or questions for you or questions for us, political or personal even. People can ask them. So
One question in particular, I'll just tell you now, is one person asked, does Andy really believe? So let's get. Well, are we recording or are we?
Yeah, we are. I'm about to get offended.
Okay, but but you can cut this if you want.
Yeah.
But does Andy really believe that we can that a revolution can happen in the USA, given that we're so far in technology, with so much of the government being able to spy on you or take over, and science now, we're so far advanced technologically that the military government can basically just cut you off and cut off. It isn't like before where people used to be able to secretly be able to have a guerrilla force. So,
well, if the question is, am I a fool? The answer is yes.
Any expand on that? Anyhow,
but I'll give a better answer next week.
All right. So, I have 6 questions. So, going back to our audience. So, it looks like we'll be discussing for the following week, we'll be going over our questions.
Yeah.
And we can continue to get more questions. No, we can continue to receive questions is the word. Yeah. Receive questions. And if anyone else is interested in another topic that they can suggest, they can also send it away, and then we can think of it for other videos as well. Yeah. Yes?
Perfect.
Right. Good. So let me just remind our audience that please subscribe, rate, and review, and best of all, share. And you on any of the 5 platforms that we are on: BitChute, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, and YouTube. All right?
Excellent.
Great.
Well, Eduardo, thank you for doing this again.
Yeah, thank you. Have happy holidays, and please tell Brandy. By now, everyone knows that Brandy is your partner. Please tell Brandy that I said I apologize for the last time that we had to make that scheduled talk in the morning.
I'll let her know, and I appreciate you making these efforts during your vacation in Mexico. And I'll see you in a week, and have a happy New Year too.
All right, you too, Andy.
All right, take care.
Ciao.